Start at the beginning. Restoration is first about diagnosis, not impulse. Roll the car into good light, lift it on stands, listen for the things that whisper and the things that shout. The first pass is visual and tactile. Wheel wells, sill seams, the battery tray, torque boxes, and the lower edges of doors where plain metal met the world and lost. Use a small hammer and tap around suspect panels. The tone tells you what paint, filler, or rotten metal is doing under there. Brake lines, rubber fuel lines, and underbody seam seals are not glamorous, but replacing them is insurance. Record what you find. A careful restoration plan lists the structure first, then drivetrain, then systems, then cosmetics. This order protects effort. You do not paint before you fix the floor. Keep this discipline, and every hour you spend will compound into something durable and honest. When the metal is spoken for, you can talk about what lies beneath the hood. The AE86 factory high-revving twin-cam 4 is light by old-school standards. An iron block married to an aluminum head, a layout meant to balance strength and weight, and an architecture that rewards attention to detail. It's not a monster motor by raw numbers, but it revs, breathes, and responds the way a well-tuned violin does, quickly and clearly. That character is why many restorers decide to keep the original engine and rebuild it to a better-than-new standard rather than swap in a larger unit. Toyota themselves have even stepped back into the story with new reproduction and remanufactured head and block components for classic owners, which makes faithful rebuilding more realistic today. Tear down must be meticulous. Label every vacuum hose, fastener, and electrical connector. Photograph assemblies from multiple angles as you remove them, so reassembly is a single, confident act instead of guesswork. When you remove the engine, carry the wiring harness with it and note any brittle insulation or heat-brittle connectors. These often fail first and create electrical gremlins later. Drain fluids into safe containers. When you strip the engine, inspect the head for valve stem play, the valves for pitting, and the head gasket surface for warpage. The block should be checked for bore scoring and for signs that cooling passages were contaminated or that the head gasket failed before. If you keep the original crank, its journals must be measured and judged against the machining tolerances recommended for the engine. If they're out of tolerance, a machine shop can grind and fit undersized bearings. That's expensive but necessary if you want longevity. Cylinder work is not glamorous, but it defines the engine. Honing the bores to a proper crosshatch and replacing rings will restore compression and oil control. Valve seats should be inspected and reconditioned so they seal cleanly. Valve guides that allow too much lateral movement rob compression and shorten valve life. Camshafts should be checked for lobe wear and bearing journals for scoring. Timing belts and tensioners must be replaced with new units. The cost is small, the downside of omission catastrophic. When reassembling, use new seals and gaskets throughout. Oil leaks are not just annoying, they invite dirt and rust and make a clean engine dirty in a single drive. Attention to the intake and ignition system lifts the personality of the engine. If you're restoring to original character, rebuild the intake manifold and replace any worn throttle shaft bushings to eliminate vacuum leaks that confuse fuel management. If your AE86 came with an early fuel injection system, understand its sensors. Air metering devices, MAP or AFM units, idle controllers, they age and need fresh calibration. Modern replacements and retro ECU swaps exist that keep the original look, but tidy the fuel curve. They are upgrades, not betrayals, and they make the car more pleasant to drive on modern fuel. Balance the urge to modify with the objective of keeping the engine's unique, rev-hungry voice. Now the metal, the AE86 is a unibody car that rewards careful, structural repair. Wherever rust is cut away, cut fully into clean metal until you see solid, viable flange and seam to weld to. A patch that overlaps rotten metal invites failure. The soundness of a patch begins with honest removal. Reproduce the geometry of the original panels. A quarter panel shaped wrong will change doors and gaps and betray the restoration to anyone who looks closely. Use match thickness steel for repairs. Too thick, and the patch will look and behave wrong. Too thin, and it won't last. Plug welding and stitch welding are techniques that recreate factory spot welds. Drill the old spot welds out, butt the new panel, and plug weld or stitch through a series of holes so you distribute heat and maintain panel alignment. After welding, grind sparingly and dress the seams, but do not remove weld reinforcement where it is doing structural work. Floor pans often rot at seams where water finds a home. Consider sectioning rather than replacing entire floors when only portions are compromised. This keeps original mounting points and preserves chassis geometry. Pay particular attention to the jacking points and the lower suspension mount areas. They carry loads and must be reconnected to unbroken metal. When a seam is rewelded around a suspension mounting point, check alignment and torque by refitting suspension components and measuring track and ride height before paint. If you are welding near fuel tanks or lines, be safe. Disconnect and remove fuel, ventilate, and ground the workpiece properly. Rust treatment is a system, not a product. After welding, treat weld seams with an acid etch where appropriate, then apply epoxy primer to protect bare steel from corrosion. Use seam sealer on joints to keep water out, and finish with a quality primer and then the chosen top coat. Undercoating can be applied carefully to cavities, but keep it away from suspension mounts and areas where heat needs to escape. If the restoration aims for longevity, consider cavity wax or rust inhibitors inside rocker channels and behind fender aprons. These do not look glamorous, but they retake time from corrosion and keep cavities quiet and sealed. Don't neglect the suspension and brakes when restoring metal. The AE86 front rides on McPherson struts, and the rear is built around a live axle with multiple lateral links and a panhard rod that keeps side-to-side movement under control. A setup that was chosen for its packaging and durability more than absolute sophistication. Bushings dry, brackets fatigue, and link arms corrode. Replace rubber bushings with new elastomer, or if the car will see track use, consider polyurethane, accepting the trade-off in NVH. Inspect control arm threads, ball joints, and tie rod ends. Worn components let the handling character evaporate. Brakes should be overhauled with fresh hardware. Caliper slides cleaned and greased, seals replaced, rotors skimmed or replaced to ensure even contact, and lines replaced if they show any sign of deterioration. A firm pedal comes from disciplined, complete work, not from cosmetic paint. Wiring and electrics often become the restoration's gremlins. Many original harnesses survive only if they have been sheltered. Where insulation is brittle, the right approach is to replace sections of the harness with reproduced wires and connectors that match original routing and terminals. Corrosion in connectors can be cleaned with appropriate products. Replace any connector with broken shells. When you restore the lighting and instrument cluster, test each circuit with a bench power supply if possible. A slow intermittent fault on the road becomes a cold, expensive night at the garage. If you want modern reliability without visible change, fit a small modern fuse box and hide relays where they cannot be seen. It's a small cheat that pays huge dividends. Interior restoration matters for experience. Seats that sag can be re-webbed and rebonded. Seat foam can be replaced with denser materials to restore seating position and support. Carpets often rot at the edges where dampness finds the floor. Replace and use correct sound deadening to keep the cabin honest but not muffled. Replacing headliners, door seals, and window felts makes the car feel new without falsifying the experience. When you restore switches and knobs, keep originals if they are repairable. They are the tactile memories the driver touches. Exterior trim, badges, and emblems should be handled with care. Sometimes gently restoring chrome and polishing plastic gives the same emotional return as a full repaint. Paint is where discipline meets vanity. Proper paint starts with straight metal, proper filler, feathered thinly, and multiple sandings with finer grit until you have a surface that reflects light without orange peel. Use a quality primer that bonds well to bare steel and to filler. Sand primers flat before base coat. Modern base coat and clear coat systems allow for durable depth and ease of maintenance and will stand up to modern fuels and detergents better than old lacquer systems. Mask with care and plan panels for minimal repaint seams. If you can avoid dismantling a whole front clip for paint, do so only if you can assure the same finish and fitment upon reassembly. A well-matched factory color will look authentic and will be kinder to the resale market if you ever sell. Reassembly is where patience repays itself. Torque every fastener to the manufacturer's specified value. Those numbers exist for a reason. Use new fasteners where corrosion has bitten threads and apply proper thread locker or anti-seize where called for. When you torque critical items like suspension mounting bolts or the head bolts, do so with calibrated tools. A head gasket is cheap insurance compared with the heartbreak of a failed seal. After the engine is reinstalled, bleed the cooling and brake systems carefully, prime the oil pump if necessary, and run the engine with a proper watch on oil pressure and cooling. An initial test drive must be done in stages. Light pulls in open spaces, then longer drives to watch temperatures, leak behavior, and suspension settling. Finally, preserve provenance. Keep a detailed build book with photographs of each major step, receipts, and part numbers. Document decisions. Whether you kept the original carburetor or fitted modern injection, whether you rebuilt to stock or fitted strengthened internals. This record is as valuable as any plaque on the dash because it carries the story of why the car is the way it is. There are sensible performance upgrades that honor the AE86 spirit. Lightweight flywheels, improved damping clutch units, refreshed differentials, and limited slip setups keep the car lively without undoing its balance. Coilover systems provide adjustable geometry and ride height for road or track use, but choose kits that respect the original roll center and avoid wild camber curves that make the car twitchy. Engine tuning should be done with care. Cam profiles change torque bands and idle behavior. Intake and exhaust balance influence throttle feel. A restrained power increase keeps the car reliable and preserves the balance that made the AE86 special in the first place. Remember that its magic is not raw power, but its chassis harmony and feedback. Restoration is also a philosophy. You can chase concours perfection and hide the car in padded rooms until it never sees rain, or you can restore for use, making choices that make the car reliable, safe, and ready to be driven and loved. Both paths are valid. Pick one and own it. If you want the car to be driven hard, prioritize brittle parts that fail under stress, cooling systems, brakes, and wheel bearings. If you want to show it, invest more in paint, trim, and upholstery. Either way, honest. Metalwork and a carefully rebuilt engine are the foundations that make every later choice meaningful. When you finally close the hood and set the wheels on pavement, the AE86 should remind you why you started. Precise steering, a willing engine that climbs cleanly through the rev range, and a chassis that tells you what the road is doing. Restoration is work, and good restoration is humble. It matches the car's original intentions while allowing for modern thinking where it increases reliability and safety. Do the structural work with respect for the original shapes, rebuild the engine with fidelity to its design, protect every seam, and document every choice. That is how you return not just metal and oil to a machine, but dignity to something that once earned its legend through pure driving joy. Now get your gloves on and start with honest, light, and steady taps. The rest follows if you're willing to do the disciplined work, and if you listen to the metal when it tells you what it needs.